I didn't know what needed to happen, but I knew that the way it was had to stop. There is nothing that would make me put my sobriety at risk.
Hi friends, this is Pej coming live from West Hollywood with my good friend Anouska. Hi Anouska, welcome. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff today. Anouska's in recovery for how many years?
20 years.
20 years.
Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, who'd have thunk it? The streets of West Hollywood and all of LA are a lot safer since Anouska got sober. We want to go over a bunch of stuff. First and foremost, if you could please subscribe to the channel if you don't already subscribe. And tell your friends about it. I'm an interventionist that tries to help people with addiction, alcoholism, and mental health get the help that they need and try to change their lives for the better. Anouska works in the field. She does a lot of stuff. We can get into that in a second. But first and foremost, you are, with a name like Anouska, I asked you recently, what are you, Russian or something? Like you said, no, not at all. You are a...
I'm a Brit.
She's a Brit.
A true Brit.
And
in fact, according to Ancestry.com, almost 100% British.
Okay. 100% British. Wow, you're like the queen or the princess. Right. So where were you raised?
So I was raised in England, London, the south of France, quite a cosmopolitan upbringing. And that did not protect me from drugs or alcohol. And I got myself into quite a few messes.
Did you have siblings?
Yes, I had siblings, and luckily my brother is not one of us. So I think I got the good luck or the bad luck or whatever.
And mom and dad were they were in your life?
Yes, yes.
Good upbringing?
I mean, good upbringing. I think, hindsight's 20/20, and there are lots of things that I experienced as a young adult. Like I came from a broken family, and I think there are challenges that children from broken homes face.
Can you give me one example? When you say broken family, what would define a family as being broken? Like one example.
So I feel like when your parents get divorced, when you're, really at any time that you can remember, there's this sense of not knowing where you belong, not having a true sense of your own identity, and maybe not feeling safe all the time emotionally. A lot of displacement, maybe moving houses, having 2 different households, moving to a lot of different schools. So that was some of my experience. Okay.
And then when did the first time you ever got involved with any substance in your life, how old were you? And what was it? And why?
I think the first time, I used to drink. So in the south of France, where I spent a lot of my early teens, in the south of France, we all drank. It's a cultural thing. We drink wine, we drink a little champagne, and when you're young, you get to sit at the table at 11, 12 years old and have a little sip. So that was probably my first drink.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then drugs? When did those come into the picture?
So drugs, a little later for me. The main problem that began with me with drugs was when I moved back to London. And I was about 16 years old. And the scene in London was far faster, and I was in a whole different crowd. So I got
like a partying, like club scene?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And back in the day, I'm 46 years old. So back
Which you don't look it at all.
Last year.
You look lovely.
But back in the day, it wasn't like it is now. You didn't need to show ID. You didn't need to be a certain age. If you dressed nicely and you were with the right people, you got into whatever club you wanted to go
parties.
to. Yeah.
Was there raves and things like that back then too?
There were raves. That wasn't really my scene, So I didn't do too many raves, but the nightclubs were, very accessible to me.
So what substances, like specifically, that you can remember that stood out?
That I can remember.
Ecstasy?
No. You know what? I did not take ecstasy.
Cocaine?
Cocaine.
Oh, so was there plenty of cocaine in England?
Cocaine was flowing as if it was, there was never an end to it. I mean, cocaine was the drug of the 90s, which was the predominant time that I was active in my addiction. And it was everywhere. There was no... everybody was doing it.
What
like
about
wherever
alcohol?
You came from. Oh, alcohol too, yeah.
And the two kind of complemented each other.
Absolutely.
Right? You just drank together and did coke?
When I first started taking cocaine, I I didn't drink. And then I found out that I couldn't go to sleep for 3 days.
Okay.
So I started realizing that I needed to drink to be able to take the edge off.
Okay. And how long of a drinking and using career did you have?
So I mean, once my drinking or drugging became a problem, around 16 I started, and I got sober at 26, so 10 years.
You got sober super young.
I did.
I mean, if you're 46 and you've been sober for 20 years, it would make sense that you got sober at 26. So, and where'd you get sober? In England or here?
So I got sober in London. I was living in the Notting Hill area, and I got sober there. And soon after I got sober, you know, people say like, oh, your life will improve when you get sober. I didn't realize how quickly that would happen.
Was there a crisis moment where you said, I must get sober? Did you go to rehab? How'd that happen?
I did not go to rehab. There was a crisis moment. I was, and I attribute my introduction, my Eskimo, to sobriety as a drummer, famous drummer in England called Rusty Egan. And he was in a band. And
if you don't know what an Eskimo is, usually an Eskimo is a person that is in recovery that kind of guides you in. I had an Eskimo too. And when she brought me in, then she relapsed, and then I became her Eskimo. So Rusty Egan. Yeah,
so Rusty was my Eskimo. I was partying with him and his wife, who is sadly, the disease got to her and she did not make it. But he was sober, and he let me know that maybe I could use some help in that area. And I was partying with his wife, and we locked him out, and he pushed the 12 steps of AA on a laminated sheet of paper under the door.
Okay.
And I was like, this guy, like, you know, what an asshole.
Right. This is before you were sober.
Before I was sober. Oh yeah. I mean, I was literally in active addiction in that moment. So, but
what was active addiction? Coke?
Yeah, cocaine, alcohol, sleeping pills. You know, you gotta, you know, one thing to come up, one thing to come down.
How long were you doing coke?
10 years.
Did you experience nosebleeds?
Oh yeah, but I mean, that's par for the course, you know.
What about depression?
Yeah, very bad depression. I think with cocaine, because cocaine is, you know, if you're snorting cocaine, it's not physically dependent. You're not going to have a physical withdrawal necessarily from that way of taking cocaine.
More mental?
Right. So for me, it was confusing because I was like, well, how can I be a drug addict if I'm not like having convulsions without my drug, if I'm not, but the truth is there are different types of ways to be addicted, right? And a lot of it was addiction by association.
Okay.
And a lot of it was, so like, I can't go out with my friends without doing this because they're all doing it. So how do I be included? And a confidence booster. And I think...
You never got into crack, right?
No.
Never smoked coke?
I did smoke coke once.
But was it like cocaine that was sprinkled on a cigarette?
No, actually, I have a great story about smoking cocaine.
Okay.
So there was a pizza place in London that we would all go to, and the owner of the pizza place was an older gentleman, and I use that term loosely, and we would all sort of party in his restaurant. And then one day he was like, you know, let me show you upstairs. And I'm like, okay. So I go upstairs and he's like, oh, do you want some Coke? And I'm like, yes, of course. Like whoever turns that down, right? And so he got out this jar and foil and, you know, and I'm like, I'd never seen that before. So I was like, what's going on? And so he lit it, he inhaled some, and then he said, come here, and he blew it in my mouth. And I was like, is this how you do this? I mean, I don't know. You know? Anyway, I didn't really want to do it again. I didn't feel very good. And but anyway, cut to, I'm at a party a few weeks later, and someone's like, oh, you know, do you want some of this? And it was the same thing. So I was like, okay. So this very cute boy was like doing it with his girlfriend there, and he inhaled it, and I went like this. And he's like, what are you doing?
Oh, you wanted him to blow it in your mouth.
I didn't know, I didn't know. So.
Okay, so then when you got sober and you didn't go to rehab, I mean, how did that go down? Were you in your house? Did you say, I'm done, I got to just dry out, or what? Like, did you detox yourself?
So I was in my house, and I remember, and I was high. It was 4 or 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I remember just thinking like you look dead inside, you know, like in my eyes that, you know, my pupils were like way big and my eyes looked black. And I just thought, that's it, you know, I'm like, you're dying inside.
So you made a decision
and
at
I
the
made
age
a
of 20.
decision.
I mean, so here's the thing, like I get hit up by lots of people that are in their youth or people that are in their mid-20s, young adulthood, that they're like in a contemplative state of maybe like my life's not working, but I think it's really huge for someone to make that decision that I'm done. Like I'm done. Not just like repetitive stopping and then starting and restarting and then stopping again. At the age of 26, that's a pretty young age to make this huge decision. So did you think I'm done for a little while, or I really want to be done with this forever?
So I think looking back, I didn't know what needed to happen, but I knew that the way it was had to stop. So something had to change. And I recalled my friend who had told me, you know, my friend Rusty, who had told me about recovery. And I thought, I'm going to call him, you know, and I called him and he told me where there was a meeting. And I remember my first meeting, it was in a place called World's End at the end of the King's Road in London. And I walked into the meeting and the speaker, I will never forget, I don't remember his name, but he was fully tattooed. He had been in prison, you know, on paper, everything that he was completely opposite to who I was.
Right.
But he told his story. And I just sat there in floods of tears because he was talking about the feelings that were like my
feelings connected to his feelings.
Yeah.
And so did you get involved in young people's recovery in England?
I feel like at the time I got sober, there wasn't like young people's recovery. Like it was just recovery. And, you know, the AA in England and the NA, in fact, I got clean in NA, was quite different. And it was, you know, it's not quite so happy clappy as it is here. There are fewer meetings, but there are still a lot of meetings. And I just knew that I was told, you know, go to a meeting every day, do 90 and 90, arrive early, sit in the front, ask questions, all the things that you would do if you wanted to learn anything, you know?
So when did you come to the States?
So I came here about 2 years, a year and a half after I got sober. California, yeah.
Los Angeles. You wanted to come to LA?
Yes, I wanted to come to LA.
Okay.
I got a great opportunity. I think I was alluding to this earlier with you, but I didn't know how fast my life would change and how good it would get so quickly. And I had been a musician for some years and I could never quite manifest or make things happen because I would slide into these I was sort of a binger in my addiction. So I would slide into these periods of addiction and then everything would fall by the wayside and then I would try and catch up again. So in the first year of sobriety, I connected with Nile Rodgers, who...
well, I know who Nile Rodgers is. Oh, nice.
So I connected with him.
What a connection.
Through some mutual friends. And I said, listen, I want to do music. These are my songs. Could you listen to them? We had a great rapport. He was so kind, so helpful, and so generous with his time and his information. And he said, why don't you come to the States and let's make some music? So he helped me move to Los Angeles.
And then coming to Los Angeles from getting sober in England and then coming here, were you... immediately, did you jump right into the recovery community in LA? Because we got a great recovery community here. So many different varieties of meetings and people and places to go and events and retreats and all that. Did you get plugged right in?
It was the very first thing I did.
Good, because your sobriety means a lot to you.
Well, also I had this huge opportunity and my biggest fear is that I would blow it, excuse the pun.
Blow, yeah, it.
Yeah. So I really wanted to make sure I didn't mess it up. And I immediately found the sort of hub of AA. And I also understood that, you know, in some countries, in some cities, AA is just for alcoholics. And in some cities like Los Angeles, AA is for anyone who had any kind of problem, really. It seems to be more inclusive.
Absolutely. Most definitely. I understand that too. And that's one of the reasons I love AA.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you tried to pursue that musical career and all that, how long were you doing that for?
You know, I'm not great with time. I'm better with time since I got sober, but it was about 5 or 6 years that I was actively working in the music business, working, you know, making a good living and meeting great people and having these wonderful experiences through different people that I met. And many of the musicians that I was working with were sober.
They had gotten sober too. Yeah. So you opened a sober living a while back. Is it okay to talk about that?
Yes.
Okay. It was in operation for 10 years, and it was a women's sober living?
I had a women's sober living. I also had a men's sober living for a short time.
Okay. And what gave you the idea to even open those places, and how did it go down? Like, what was that all about?
So, like many of the great things that have happened in my life, they came about through desperation.
Okay.
The gift of desperation, right? And the sober living was no different. I had been in the music business that wasn't working out the way I had wanted it to. I also wanted a more stable way of living. I wanted to have a family. So I decided that I wanted to work in another field. I started working in television for a little bit, doing hosting, and I got a gig doing that was working out pretty well until it wasn't anymore. And one thing after the other happened in about a 6-month period. My house got broken into. I broke up with the guy I was dating. I lost my job, or quit my job because it wasn't a great environment. And then I had all these, and my roommates all moved out. So I was in a financially stressful situation. So I thought to myself, like, what am I going to do? In fact, it was in this house, the house that we're sitting in right now. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose my house. So a friend of mine, Honey, had started a sober living. And I was like, what is a sober living? And she was like, well, you know, it's a place that people go to transition after they come out of rehab or detox or treatment so that they can learn tools for living, so that they can transition back into regular life without such an abrupt cutoff, right? I'm like, well, that sounds amazing. So what do you need to do to have a sober living? And she was like, well, you need to know how to be sober and you need to have a house. And I'm like, okay, check, right?
Right.
So I'm like, you know, I said to my friends who were in sobriety with me at the time, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start sober living. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I know how to be sober and I have a house. So I dove straight in, head first, and I learned on the run, you know? And it was the most extraordinary and transformational experience.
I love that.
You know?
You said something that stood out to me. You said you knew how to be sober. So there's a lot of people that get sober, and I get asked this all the time. Like, there's people that get sober, and then there's people that haven't ever gotten sober yet. So their interpretation of sober, they question it. They're like, some of them will say, so like, you don't even drink? Or you don't just smoke weed every once in a while? I'm like, no, sober means to be abstinent to me, like 100% sober. That's my style of sobriety. That's what I got sober in. And that's exactly how I like to live. I can't do just a little bit of this and that because a little bit of this and that will turn into a bit of this and that. And so I believe in emotional sobriety. I believe that it's very important to embrace sobriety. Earlier when we were talking with Richie, we talked about being recovered, right? So when you say that you know how to be sober, do you ever, because I know some people ask me, like, do you ever feel like your sobriety is at risk, or do you ever feel like you might relapse? And personally, like me, I there's a lot of problems that life might present, but nothing that a drink or a drug will ever fix.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable in your skin and your sobriety? Do you love your sobriety?
Yeah, I love my sobriety. There is nothing that would make me put my sobriety at risk. My life's too good to risk throwing it all away, you know? I'm very diligent. I speak to my sponsor at least 5 days a week. I go to meetings. I still go to a few Zoom meetings because I'm a mom. And I have a regular meeting of people who, I think it's always important, or it has been for me, to have a core group of people who know me, who know the signs of when I'm not doing well, so that they can call me out. You know, not just my sponsor, because he kind of lives far away, but a core group of people. So that, you know, meeting with people, and also diligently continuing to do step work, you know, because that's the program of AA, and that's where the change is cultivated in me, is when I actually identify my defects, identify the behaviors that those defects cause, identify the opposites of those defects, and then start practicing the opposites of the defects in my daily life.
I love it. I love it all. So for anybody that's out there struggling, male, female, doesn't matter who, do you have some good energy or anything positive that you'd like to say in regards to sobriety? If somebody feels like they're helpless and hopeless, what could you say that could be words of encouragement?
I think what I would like to tell anyone who's struggling is, even in the moments where you feel the most despair, the most hopelessness, things change. Things can change. If you have the right help, and the right help is for fun and for free and available to you. And if you want it, it's there. And you never know how much and how much your life can change and how good it can be. Because I didn't, and I could have missed everything good in my life by throwing it away.
Wonderful. So thank you for talking to me today. We're going to make some other videos too also about some other stuff that you're doing. My name is Pej again. Please remember to subscribe if you're not subscribed to this channel. If you have a loved one that's struggling, or if you yourself are struggling and you don't know how to get the help that you need, or you just need somebody to talk to, you can always contact me at 310-596-9356. Again, my name is Pej, and thank you, Anouska.
Thank you.
Have a good day.